Yeah, well, and that is part of the problem in some cases because we all know that the unions tend to be an old boys network, and in many cases what that means is an old white boys network, and it's folks, not only old white boys, but it's an old white boys network that primarily seems to look after a younger generation of folks that are coming up that don't necessarily come from the city of Detroit, don't live in Detroit, and are not African American. So in many cases, what that means when you're doing these surprise visits or when you're doing these investigations in response to these complaints, you don't just look at the contractor, you do look at the union as well. You get inside the union, you talk to them, you find out what they're doing to promote apprentice programs in the city of Detroit. Are they doing apprentice programs at all? Do they have any kind of outreach program? Are they dealing with the high schools? Are they recruiting from high schools? Do they have somebody that goes in and tries to let people know that this can be a viable alternative and that we're looking for people that we can train and become a part of the union? And you have some that do. You got some unions that are doing an outstanding job of that. And you've got others that not necessarily haven't really taken it seriously. They all need to be monitored. This wasn't really a construction issue, but several years ago, there was a case where there was a company, I'm drawing a blank on the name of it, but it was located on the city's northeast side. They were looking for a tax abatement. They wanted a 12-year tax break. And part of how they were making the rationale that they needed the 12-year tax break because it was too costly to operate in the city without this discount. So they were pitching it from the standpoint of, look, if the city of Detroit and the city council approves us getting this tax break, then we'll guarantee that we'll continue to invest in the city and stay in the city, as well as do an expansion of our plant operations. The problem that I had with it, however, was that if you looked at their employment numbers, the overwhelming majority of the employees at this company didn't even live in the city of Detroit. I mean, it was like a huge number. I think at best there was less than 5 of their employees that actually lived in the city. So I questioned it, fought it, ultimately it was approved. And I do remember the name of the company now, it was Voss Lance, which is some sort of steel processing center at that time on the city's northeast side. I don't know if they're still there. So I voted no on it ultimately. We weren't able to put together the votes to block it completely, but I voted no for that reason. It didn't benefit the city of Detroit. It really was not benefiting Detroit because most of their employees didn't live in the city of Detroit. So it's like we would have been given, and are now actually given, a tax break to a company that was mostly employing people from outside the city of Detroit, but was positioned at that point to get a tax break from the city. And it just didn't make any sense to me. I'll be honest, I could not support an overall ban. Now, I know that water rate hikes and the cost of water in the city of Detroit continues to be a controversy, but we got to remember something. Not a whole lot's free. I know there's some folks that think that water is a human right and therefore they ought to have free access to it, but let's be realistic, especially right now. We're in a city with a $250 million budget deficit. We can't afford to provide any service free of charge. We just cannot do that. That is not economic reality. I mean, yeah, if you want free water, you can go to the Detroit River and tie a rope to a bucket and drop it in the river and pull it back up, but who's going to want to drink that? If you want clean, fresh water that is safe to bathe in, safe to drink, safe to cook food in, it's got to be processed. It's got to be treated. There are things that have got to be done to it before it winds up in your household. And that stuff costs millions and millions of dollars. So in order for us to pay for that and make that happen, especially when you got a system that's almost 100 years old, there are actually wooden pipes in the ground in this city. That shows you how old the system is. When you got a system that's that old, it can't be free. And to do a total ban on shutoffs, that would just put the city deeper into a financial crisis than we already are. What I do support, however, is an effective program to help people pay their water bills. And we've got the building blocks of that in the form of the Water Assistance Plan. That has been in place now for a number of years. It was actually a project and an initiative of City Council. And that, I think, even though it really hasn't worked out that well, because I think the mayor really has not figured out a way to implement it so that it's user-friendly and so that more people have access to it, but the building blocks are there. I do support that because that way everybody wins. The city gets its money, it gets paid, but citizens are also able to get the assistance that they need so that their water's not being shut off and they can pay their bills. That I do support, but a total ban on shutoffs, it wouldn't make any sense and it would not do the city good ultimately. Well, you know, the one thing there too that we also got to keep in mind is part of what I think we need to do here in the city of Detroit in terms of addressing a lot of these issues is that we got to uplift people. And what I mean by that, and I know the water bills have gone up because I know I looked at my last monthly bill and I was just thinking, because now we're getting billed monthly. It used to be that you only got your bill 4 times a year. So we used to get billed quarterly. I looked at my last monthly bill and I was like, God, I can remember it wasn't that long ago when I'd get a bill for 3 months and it wasn't as high as this. And this is just one monthly bill. But I also know that for a lot of folks, if you're having trouble paying your water bill, then it probably means you got a bigger problem than just your water bill. You know, odds are you're maybe having trouble making your rent, maybe having trouble making your car payment if you got a car. Maybe even if you're a house owner, you may have, and this is a really huge problem paying that mortgage note. So I think what we need to do is really need to try to like tie all this stuff together and start working with citizens to really uplift them, to get them to the point where they can do the things that they need to do, whether it's through job training or helping people get a better job that's going to pay them more, so that you're not even in that situation. Because ultimately, you know, even if we were to do like a ban on water shutoffs, is that going to help you with your mortgage? Is that going to help you with your insurance? Is it going to help you buy groceries? We got to start looking at this stuff in, for want of a better term, a kind of total holistic way, so that we're really uplifting people to the point where they don't need to call us for help paying a bill because they got it. Well, one thing I was working on in the mayor's office, and even though the election didn't go my way, it's still something that I'm working on, is the whole issue of prisoner reentry, because that's a major concern in the community, not just from an unemployment standpoint, but also from the standpoint of we have so many people who get out of prison and they come back home and they want to do the right thing, they want to be on the right path, but there's so many obstacles against them. I mean, you get prejudged, you know, people pull your record. I mean, there have even been some folks that have gone so far as to suggest that Detroit as a city government ought to do what some other cities have done, which is to even take that question off the job application. And I think that's something to consider. But the thing is now, in the era of the internet, it doesn't matter. I mean, you get the right information on a person, you can pretty much find out everything that they've ever done in their life in an afternoon. So part of what I think we have to do as we look at this issue of prisoner reentry is trying to create different programs out there to help that particular group. One thing that I see potential in is we're getting stimulus dollars from the federal government. And one of the things that we wanted to do in my administration when I was mayor was to take some of that money and use it for job retraining efforts that in some cases actually can target people who got out of prison and who are looking for work or who are looking for an opportunity to actually build a career for themselves. We need to do that kind of stuff, and I think there's a way to even do it and tie it into creating a new industry. Because, I mean, the auto industry is our past, but I don't think it's going to be our future. Again, I have a green agenda, and part of my green agenda is to promote the growth and development of green industry here in the city of Detroit. And I think there's opportunities for people to do that. Ex-prisoners or just other folks. I mean, for example, weatherization. Being able to go into like maybe a senior citizen's house and caulk windows and show that person how to adjust their thermostat or do some other things, that doesn't require like a degree. That's the sort of stuff that a couple days worth of training, you can take somebody that got out of prison and get them into the right job when they can go in and do that. And you can do that, like I said, with a couple days training. And I think these are some of the things that we have to do more of.